like to call the meeting to order. Welcome tonight to our meeting. At this time, I'd like to call the roll. We'll answer. Nancy Baker.
Here.
Ronnie Bill. Not here, so he has a Carl.
Yes, sir.
Larry Cox.
Here.
Casey Cooper.
Here.
Carolyn Cowley. Not here. Joyce Edwards.
Here.
Maggie Faulkner. Vicki Green.
Here.
Yeah.
Monica Harris.
It's Myrna.
Myrna, I'm
Here.
sorry. Dr. Jeff Heck.
Here.
Judy Johansson.
Yeah.
Michael Lavender. Pat McGinnis. Marsh Pittman. Judy Poe.
Here.
Mandy Stone. Duncan Sumter.
Here.
Ed Charlton.
Here.
And Charles Vine.
Here.
We have approximately 4. Again, welcome everyone. At this time, second item on the agenda is public comment. I'd like to call on Mary Joy.
Hi. It's kind of fun that Jerry's not here to operate the camera, so I'm not going to turn it on myself.
Do that.
No, don't! I think people get tired of looking at me anyway. I am here today to specifically address the provider network issue that happened with Katie and her services. If Katie could talk, then I would let her tell you. Katie's individual service plan is due to start November 1st. So that requires that fabulous ISP meeting to occur in, September 5th, so that it can be submitted October 1st. So you have time to get through utilization review so it can start November 1st. So I decided, in preparation of the changes that were happening with the relative as direct service worker, that I would go ahead and request the community guide service to help Katie integrate with her community and find those fabulous unpaid natural supports that everyone seems to believe are out there. So, at the meeting, I was very specific to ask the care coordinator and Christy Pruis, who came to the meeting, for the community guide providers available to us in Alexander County. So time passes, and on the 29th of September, the care coordinator tells me that the plan is ready for me to sign. Well, how can it be ready for me to sign if there's no named provider in the community guide block? Oh.
Yeah.
So that then started a series of emails where she tried to talk me out of community guide. Cool, right? So then that meant I sent emails to my elected officials, Mark Hollow and Austin Allran. And Mark Hollow, being a co-chair of the Health and Human Services Joint Legislative Oversight Committee, sent me the most hysterical email in response to my email, suggesting something like I contact DSS as if they had control over the LME-MCO provider network. So, finally, I am told that, oh, you can call Turning Point. The email says Turning Point Services. So they give me the phone number to Lenore, not to Boone, so I know this is wrong. So, but I call anyway. So I call Lenore. And the little girl on the phone, for whatever reason, gives me the phone number for the actual community guide worker, Q, whatever she is. So I call her, and she says, oh, I'm not accepting new referrals. So let me get this straight. I have a choice of exactly 0 providers. 0. So at this point, I go ahead and send an email to every member of the JLOC on HHS.
Yeah.
And thank goodness that Senator Heiss went ahead and forwarded my email to Senator Berger, so the President Pro Tem of the Senate. And so this really nice kid at Senator, calls me from Senator Berger's office, and we have this fabulous little conversation where, of course, you have to educate him. And anyway, within a matter of a couple of days, and I did file a grievance. I filed a formal grievance, and I have a grievance number and all that, against the care coordinator and against Smoky Mountain. And so the care coordinator emails me with the name of 2 providers. 1 being Turning Point, and 2 being the Arc of North Carolina in Asheville. So somebody needs to explain to me how a community guide in Asheville is going to connect Katie to her unpaid volunteer supports in Alexander County. But I'm so glad that Senator Berger is aware of what the truth is. So you as a board should clearly understand your responsibilities about the provider network. Of all the people in the world to screw up with, you shouldn't have screwed up with me.
Yeah.
But onward and upward.
Yeah.
And Mary, we have Katie Short. Katie Short, you signed her up.
Thank you. Katie's comment for today
Yeah.
has to do with asking the board to please, if the board members, if someone on the board would please make a motion to revisit the relative as direct service employee policy and clearly compare the policy to the actual section of the North Carolina Innovations waiver that was effective October 1st, 2013. I do not believe, Katie does not believe that your policy actually follows what the waiver document says in regards to relative as direct service employee, and or that it mentions or is consistent in that the waiver document clearly states that if Katie's ISP indicates that the team reviewed all of the options for providing services and the team agreed that the relative should provide services, then that's part of the policy, the relative as direct support employee policy in the waiver document. That should be followed by the LMEMCO. So Katie would just like the board to revisit the relative as direct support employee policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kathy Ryder.
Just a reminder that our comments do come from our experience in the trench, and we want to give you either a broader perspective or an opportunity to see things from the way that we see them. So I'm the parent of an adult on the waiver. You met Thomas several months ago. After 4 years, he's ending his placement in an unlicensed AFL.
Yeah.
An unlicensed AFL is a one-person group home, and he's blown out of that. He was in the hospital for 3 days, lots of behavioral issues. He's a high-maintenance fellow with significant behaviors daily. He does nothing well. He does lots of things well, but doing nothing is not one of them. So when the weather is bad and there's no motors to fix, he has a tendency to find trouble. He's tiring and challenging for his provider. $5 a day of the daily rate goes towards a respite fund so she could have a break from him. But according to the policy, she needs to leave her home that she pays for. He gets to stay there, and she has to pay to go someplace else to get respite. Not very intuitive, and the bottom line is she doesn't want to pay to go someplace to have respite. So this lack of respite, I think, probably, I'm not going to say probably, did contribute to the end of that placement. And it's a problem. So the purpose of my comments is to remind you how concerned we are with out-of-home placements in general. Because now I got to find him someplace to go, and given that he has a 20 by 20 shed of stuff, this is not an easy thing. I know Nancy's had a positive experience with her son, but Thomas was financially exploited in his first place. The second placement let him buy a gun, not probably smart, and introduced him to online porno, a real quality of life issue. So I was at the Clyde listening session and heard Dave Richards say that waiver participants who need more than 12 hours a day of services may have to accept that they're going to be in a residential placement. Again, parents are worried about residential placements because bad things often happen. There's a small number of people who are at risk of being placed out of home because they need more than 12 hours a day of service. They really require one-on-one staffing. They can't be carefully, effectively, and safely cared for in a 1-on-3 setting. Then that's the option. So I just want to remind you, we're concerned with our adult children having to be in a place where there's often dangerous things that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the review and approval of the agenda. Everyone has had a chance to review the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
2 seconds. Okay. Any questions or comments? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Review and approval of prior meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? September 25th. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Okay. Conflict of interest disclosure and quarterly compliance report. Call on Tracy Hayes, our general counsel.
Good evening. Does anybody have a conflict of interest, a big conflict of interest to report? There's been one potential conflict of interest disclosed that we will discuss later as part of the nominating committee recommendations. In terms of the quarterly compliance report, I'll go through that very briefly.
Tracy, folks can't hear you at the end of the room.
All right.
It's actually hard, the floor just came out down here.
I know.
So you have to really belt it out.
Not stand up. Okay. The compliance hotline. This is the hotline that people can call to anonymously report fraud or abuse. We've had 4 calls made in the past quarter. One involved a provider that we were already in litigation with. They are no longer in our network or providing services. 2 were provider self-reports of staff who worked for the provider billing for services that they did not provide. This is fairly typical. The provider reports that and then notifies us in case those claims back, and then does a self-audit to ensure that no other claims were submitted that should not have been. And 1 was actually a grievance, not a drug abuse report. We also received a number of other fraud and abuse concerns outside of the compliance hotline that may be reported directly to individual staff. A common example of that would be we send out EOBs, just like any of you would receive from your insurance company. We don't send them to every consumer every month for every service. They're done on a sampling basis. And occasionally a consumer will receive the EOB and compare it to their record of having received services and call us to say, I did not receive services on the day for which this provider has billed. And those would be investigated by our program integrity staff. In terms of compliance issues identified by oversight agencies, we received our annual IMT report. It went very well. Mercer, as always, identified a number of best practice recommendations. some of which we will choose to implement and others we will not. An example of the type of best practice recommendation we will not implement, they recommended that all of our program integrity staff receive an extremely expensive certification and training that VMA does not even require of its own program integrity staff. And VMA has not accounted for that cost in our opinion. There were a small number of corrective actions. We reviewed them at ELT this week and they have been assigned to appropriate staff. We will report back on progress in the next quarter. Examples of those would be assuring that when we do identify an overpayment and recoup the overpayment, that is properly reflected in our out claim system. And the chart reviews showed that our providers have not been doing a good enough job of documenting medical necessity or engaging in treatment planning. So that's an external compliance issue we will address with our provider network. Compliance training was provided to all staff at the July staff meetings. A makeup session was held on August 20th, and 2 sessions were held for customer services and call center staff on September 19th. Compliance posters, thank you very much to Shelley and her team. They updated those, and those have been printed and posted at all SMC offices and made available to providers. It's also being incorporated into our website, handbooks, and other printed materials. In the last month, we also developed a new PIP poster that has been taped above all shared copiers, printers, scanners, and fax machines, reminding staff not to leave PHI out in the open. We continue to perform background and exclusion checks on all staff and providers. This is part of both of our HR and credentialing functions. We're implementing an improved background release form to ensure compliance with federal law regarding informed consent. In terms of the significant risks facing the organization, a security breach, a breach of PHI remains our largest risk. In terms of addressing that, we recently completed our security risk assessment. All laptops have been encrypted. We are pricing mobile device encryption options, and we are evaluating our options for email encryption. Currently, email is encrypted if you choose to encrypt it. The other option is to have all email be encrypted and you opt out. And we are looking into doing that. The Privacy and Security Subcommittee now meets at least twice a month. They are presenting a comprehensive privacy and security training to all staff in November and are also developing department-specific trainings. Our privacy officer and I are revising our notice of privacy practices and working on helping departments conduct self-audits and HIPAA compliance. The other 2 risks that have been identified for the organization, one has to do with our continuity of business operations planning, which would include things like disaster recovery. And then the final risk would be staff safety in the community. Our staff go out into the community, they go into people's homes, they go to provider agencies, and they face significant personal safety risks when they do that. So we want to make sure that we have developed appropriate safety mechanisms, reporting mechanisms, so we know where staff are whenever they do that. Some of you may recall an incident within the last 5 years where a Department of Insurance investigator went to an insurance agency to do a routine audit in Charlotte and did not come out of that encounter alive. So we want to make sure that all of our staff are safe. Compliance work plan projects that have been completed or near completion. You will recall the compliance work plan was presented in June and identified a number of projects that the compliance committee will be working on. The first project was restructuring the contracting function and improving data entry. That project has been basically complete. We've hired a new contract manager. We have revised and implemented security incident response protocols. We have revised the annual compliance training. We have reviewed and are revising our code of ethics and conduct. And we have revised our employee conflict of interest forms. We are also establishing a database of applicable state and federal regulations, and we are revising the consumer and innovations handbooks. There are some specific consumer and litigation risks that we will discuss in closed session.
Thank you. The next agenda item, number F, is Consumer and Family Advisory Committee report. Pat's not here.
I'm going to give it.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm the chair of the Southern CFAC, and Pam had to be out today, so she asked me if I would put the report together. basically, CFAC for the last couple of months have been doing a lot of house cleaning. We realized that there was a lot of things that we needed to get in place to stay in compliance. So we've been working on a relational agreement back with the board. We've been getting our brochure up and going. We're looking at our appointments with CFAC, rotation of members, and then, of course, getting fully updated with everything that's going on with smoking. But one of the biggest things that CFAC finally decided to do, which was not working for us, and we were all able to sit down and talk about it, is that when we merged with Smoky, our CFAC meeting schedule totally changed. And basically, 1 month we were meeting with our region. The second month, we were doing a video conference, which basically ended up being a waste of time. It wasted Smokey's time, a waste of our time. We walked out feeling like we got nothing accomplished because we're sitting in a room, we've got 3 great big things going up there and barely be able to see everybody, not knowing who was talking. Members felt like if they were going to have to drive X amount of hours to get to this kind of meeting, then they were going to stay at home. And then our third month, we were actually going into our executive meeting. So at our retreat, we all sit down and talk about it. And as much as I want to know what's going on in the 23 counties, I can't. I've got to be focused on 8 counties. And that's the 8 counties that I'm a part of in my CFAC. The other CFACs are going to have to bring that info into us. So we basically decided we did away with our video conference meeting. So now our local CFACs meet 1 month, steering committee meets the next, our local CFACs come back and meet the next. That way we can do the work that we need to do, and we have decided that we will get together either once or twice a year, come together, find out what everybody's doing. We'll also be communicating through email. But CFAC can't do the work that they need to do if they're only going to meet once every 3 months. And we felt like we had lost a lot in what we were trying to keep up with, trying to find out what was going on. So in order for us to do the work that we need to do, we refocused and went back and looked at what was best for CFAC. So now we're kind of getting everything back up and going, and we're starting from scratch again. So we've had our local meetings, our steering committee will meet the following month, CFAC will get back together, and at some point, we'll all come back together and find out what we're doing. So I thought it was a really good meeting. We all got to know each other really well, and that's the basis of what we need to be doing to report back to you guys. But we just really felt like we were losing a lot of the focus that we needed to be doing for CFAC, and we didn't want to lose our CFAC. So now we're back on a schedule and feel like we can get caught up and do a better job reporting back to you guys as to exactly what's going on out in our area and what you as the board needs to know. That's where we're at.
Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Next item, agenda item G, Provider Advisory Council Report, Dr. Sumter.
Thank you. The Provider Network Council continues to work on the goals that we discussed at our last meeting. The focus right now is on integrated care. We're working really hard to define what is integrated care, who's come up with a common understanding of what that is, how can that be implemented across our system, both as a broad piece as well as down in the weeds and really get to it. So a lot of work is being done on that with the council right now, and Eric Christensen with CCNC is really doing a great job of spearheading this. I want to thank him. The second piece that we're also working on goes directly to some of the public comments. We're really working on performance and outcome measures within the provider network. Everybody's concerned about ensuring that we have quality services and quality providers available. And a piece that goes right in with that is around the gap analysis, especially around the IDD piece, especially for folks who are not a part of the innovations group. And so we're looking at how can we pull together as a system to make the best use of the dollars available to serve as many people as we can in the best way possible. So I'm really proud of folks that come in, they're volunteers. many people there are paid to be there through their agencies. It's not like CFAC, who is totally volunteer driven, and I can't applaud CFAC enough for that. But still, people are spending an extraordinary amount of time sharing resources and making sure it's a system we can do as best possible job that we can. So we're looking for feedback and feedback. That's our report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next item is the County Commissioner Advisory Board Report. I'd like to call on Shelley Foreman.
Hello,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry you get to hear from me instead of Michael this evening. I know he wasn't able to be here. Just a reminder, Smoky had its first County Commissioner Advisory Council meeting in August, and when we met, the group really decided that they wanted to meet quarterly and that they wanted to meet in a centralized location, so they will be meeting in Asheville. We have our next meeting scheduled for November 6th, and based on the requests that we had by many representatives and counties, what we want to do for that group is to help provide them with a picture, a better picture of how Smoky is funded, the kind of funding that we receive through state, local, federal resources and Medicaid. And we want to show them how we spend some of that money both at the macro level and then really looking at how that plays out regionally. Talk to them a little bit about the comprehensive providers that we have, the kinds of services that are provided, the number of people that are served, both state and Medicaid consumers, and looking at other available services in their communities. We also are working to sort of break that down so that they can get a snapshot of their service delivery system in their county. And we think that this is something that will be helpful for them to see because they many times get questions from people in their community about what services are available, what might not be available, what the needs are. Part of what we plan to do that evening is also talk to them about, here's your snapshot, here's where we are now. But we also had a very effective gap analysis, and from that a provider network development plan. So we also will be talking to them about what we plan to do as an organization to move forward and better meet the needs that have been identified in that gap analysis. And I think from there, we'll just talk about, what they might need in the way of additional information. But I really do appreciate Fred and his team have been very helpful. Sean Jones with Network and his team, and Brian and Christina have been very helpful in making sure we all get focused and get that work done. So we'll report more after the meeting in November. I'm sure it's information you all would be interested in seeing, although you can get it every month. But I think the group is going to have some changes after the election in November. We will be reaching out to those counties that have shifts for current members and trying to identify, usually December is the month that county boards and commissions do all their board appointments. So hopefully by our January meeting, we will know the renewed or new membership for the County Commissioner Advisory Council.
Can I just chime in here a little bit? I would say that the days where Shelley used to do this a lot. I used to do it with her. Some combination of us go out and, be at county commissioner meetings once per quarter. You can't do that anymore.
Not even physically or logistically.
Yeah, I guess if I did that, I guess I wouldn't get to do anything else. That's the way I put it. So we're really trying to find a way to still certainly make meetings out with counties and with managers and commissioners to do that in situations where that kind of face-to-face interaction is really required. But the goal is to create a way that we can have an information transfer on a larger level that's helpful to all counties, and that's challenging. Carl?
The fundamental basis of the MCOs remains that it's a county service being provided jointly through the entity. To the extent that we lose our focus, even though it's governed by state law, we're very used to as county managers, it's still a joint services agency, and those county commissioners are the key to holding that together in many regards. I don't disagree that it's impossible for 23 counties that the executive director meets with the counties quarterly or even annually. But I think there needs to be a way that the organization visits those county commissioner meetings once a year at least, in a substantive way, engages them in discussion, encourages them, and it lets them know that their joint agency is doing the job.
Why are you?
Carl, that could be at the Council of Government meeting.
Excellent.
I don't think you can.
You don't
I
think
really-
it can be at the
no.
Council?
Very few commissioners go to those meetings. In our case, there's one commissioner who sometimes goes. It's one commissioner from the 4 counties. And I really think it needs to be at a commissioner's meeting that occurs.
Well, then, that's a big difference between your region,
Could be.
the Southwestern Commission region, Haywood County West. We always have a meal, or had a meal, and I assume they still do, and that gets out everybody.
In our case, there's a meal, and maybe we'll get one commissioner from each county. It's just that it's not as engaged as the IPDC. And so I think it really does, I think, given the basis of the organization, it's important to go back to that root once a year in a substantive way.
And what I can do is I'm getting ready to schedule to get out and about again as soon as November comes and goes, just to see what changes. And I will work very hard to connect with Brian to help him try to schedule when I'm coming or any other time.
I'm one, you've got Rick, you've got, a lot of other managers, and of course, you've got commissioners serving it. I think that that's important, but,
Well, I think the point is, we're trying to find the most practical and helpful way to do all of that.
my constant refrain is, there's no there. And my constant refrain is, there's no there locally anymore.
Well, I
Holding
would
back-
disagree.
I know, but I know, you guys work all hard, but I know you work hard.
Resources that we.
But,
we've,
and you do.
invested.
But to the commissioners and to a lot of people, it still exists that way. And anything we can do to put a face to it in front of the commissioners, I think is good.
County commissioners started doing, sending out a video of like every quarter, and it just addresses what's going on and problems and things like that.
It's our news you can use. We do that in a written format. On a monthly basis to really try to cover all bases. So, that's true.
I'll go out and turn on the thing on the
We
front.
can do that.
Video, and do a sign.
We could have a YouTube channel. Okay. All right.
Jody, what's the location?
It's November 6th. It's at the Biltmore office. We set out a calendar for the whole rest of the year, so they can, just as a reminder, the county managers and the county commissioner designee are invited to those members, and we really hope that you will be able to take the information we provide and share that back with your county boards and commissioners as well. 5:30. You'll be getting an agenda and a meeting notice this Monday.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the report of the Finance Committee. I call on Judy Clay at this time.
Everyone has received the financial statements as of the end of September 30th, the first quarter of the fiscal year. I'll just go through a few highlights unless there are some additional questions. The first statement I'll review is the balance sheet. Under cash checking and then trust funds, there is a balance of $7 million. Under cash Medicaid risk reserve, which is a requirement, it's at 13.9 at the moment. The investment in North Carolina Capital Management Trust is at 13.7. Most of the balance in the North Carolina Trust did come from Western Highlands, and that has since been consolidated into a Smoky account at the North Carolina Trust. I will comment a little bit about the accounts receivable Medicaid waiver, which now stands at 4.9 million. That is a net figure. There is a 50% allowance for doubtful accounts, so the actual accounts receivable is at 9.9 million. There was a statement shared with the Finance Committee members about how that stands with all of the LMEs, MCOs within the state of North Carolina. It is a considerable balance in excess of 15 million collectively for those LMEs, MCOs. We have had a roundtable of the chief executive officers within the state, meeting with divisions of medical assistance as well as DMHDD, mental health and developmental disabilities, as well as substance abuse. There has been an acceptance that there is an issue. There is not, as to date, a process for resolving this particular accounts receivable that Smokey has as an individual, LME MCO, or the others as well. There's been several technical assistance meetings with representatives of us with the state sitting down reviewing the issue. But right now, as of today, we do not have a process in place to resolve this specific concern. The overwhelming representation of what this accounts receivable is, which affects our per member per month revenue calculation, is in the AFTC category of aid. 70% of that accounts receivable is within that category of aid. So it's very hard to understand why the largest eligibility group is most affected by this phenomenon where they're not recognizing what we are eligible for reimbursement. Explaining that a little bit, our per member per month is based upon Medicaid eligibility within the 23 counties that we have responsibilities for. What we are being paid for in terms of what's in the enrollment versus what we can confirm and look at in terms of the eligibility file. There's a significant discrepancy, and is that we're trying to resolve. So that number is likely to grow over the short run until a resolution is finally reached. Questions? Going to the liability side of the balance sheet, accounts payables is currently at 6.1 million, and the accounts payable IBNR Medicaid, which is incurred but not reported, is currently at 15.7. Looking at our current assets versus current liabilities ratio on the Medicaid side, it's at 2.1. And on total, the total of all funds, it's just under 4. Now what that is we have cash over liabilities by that ratio. It's essentially a fancy way of putting it. The fund balance, looking at that part of the balance sheet, under committed, those three first lines, unemployment compensation, annual leave payout, and retention risk reserve, do reflect the resolution passed by the board and approved by the Division of Mental Health in terms of our fund balance commitment, so that has taken place. In addition to that, the administrative office leasehold improvements is also represented on this balance sheet, which has been approved by both the board as well as the division. Overall then, in terms of Medicaid revenue over expense year to date, again, this is as of September 30th, is just over $4 million. Any question about the balance sheet? The next statement is the analysis of revenue versus expense. It's divided into two groups. One talks about Medicaid and the other is state and other federal funds with a final total balance. On the Medicaid revenue side, there's a total of $65 million. Expenses for the first quarter are $62.6. There is currently a surplus as of the end of September 30th on the Medicaid side. Services at 2.5. On the administrative side, expenses of revenue of $8.8 million, expenses of 7.2. So there's a surplus there as well, for a total surplus on the Medicaid side only of just over $4 million, which was previously stated on the balance sheet. On the state side, state, federal, and county, revenue of $13.9 million, expenses at 11.9 with a surplus of just under $2 million. On the administrative side, overall, there is a small deficit at about $45,000 overall, going to the end of September 30th for the close of the first quarter. This is not unusual. This reflects the overall complaint within the state of the LDs and MCOs that there's insufficient state dollars to support our responsibilities to the state for the administration of their programs. Overall, for all sources, revenue over expense, we're at 6.6 for the good, which is a good number, and may that continue for the balance of the year. I will not go through the other dashboards unless someone has a specific question. They were reviewed in detail with the Finance Committee, and I am available to answer questions both during the board presentation or thereafter. If people have individual questions.
We need a motion to accept the report. Is there a second? All in favor of accepting the financial report, committee report, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None, hearing none, passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A1 to consult with the attorneys in order to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C, 126.1, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Barry?
Whoops.
We're back in open session, everyone. We still got some agenda items to do tonight. The next item on the agenda is a report from the nominating committee, and call on Vicki Green, chair of the nominating committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. French. The nominating committee met at 4 o'clock today. The members who were present, Jason Skipper, Charles Bunn, Rick French, and me, looked at a list of board member recommendations. We're putting forth this slate of board members tonight. It won't be voted on until the December 11th board meeting. And I do want to go down through here person by person. I would be screaming right now if I were you. Carl Classen, it's your lucky day. We are proposing to move you from a 1-year to a 2-year term. Marsh Pittman has not been in very good health, and you have attended regularly, and we look forward to your being in a 2-year slot. Sorry, Carl. Thank you, Carl.
Right now.
Larry Cox is a county commissioner who seems to have disappeared on us, but he has one of those at-large seats where we attempted to put as many county commissioners in as were possible. Joyce Edwards has an expertise in social services matters and proposing to reappoint her for a 3-year term. Myrna Harris, we just got you here. So we're proposing to reappoint you for a 3-year term. Judy Johansson, Nancy Baker, and Pat McGinnis are all CFAC appointees, and you all have not met to discuss your reappointment, but you should have by December the 11th, when this board will vote on the folks whose names are being mentioned now. Duncan Sumter, we do feel as though you will be continuing since you're president of the Providers Council, and would want you reappointed for a 1-year term. Dr. Jeff Peck. we want you to continue for a 1-year non-voting slot in recognition of possible appearance of conflict of interest between MAHEC and Smoky Mountain Contracts and Initiative.
And I agree with that. So
Okay.
you're not,
Good.
not a problem.
Casey Cooper, we're glad to have you as a hospital administrator here. Michael Lavender and Vicki Green are going to change places. I am currently an at-large member, but I will move to the county commissioner slot for a 2-year period, and Michael Lavender will become an at-large member. Yes, he is no longer a county commissioner, but he has expertise, or will no longer be a county commissioner after December, but yes, he has expertise that will continue to be valuable to this board. Marsh Pittman, it's a 1-year deal, Carl, and you will have 2 years. I mentioned Nancy Baker, Maggie Faulkner, no change. Ed Tarleton, glad to have you here. Ronnie Beal will continue in an at-large capacity for 3 years. Carolyn Coward, your expertise with healthcare, we continue to need. Rick French, you know it all, that's why we're for a 3-year period. Judy Poe, you're one of those other folks who you may no longer be a county commissioner after the December board meeting, but your expertise in mental health will continue to be needed. And let me remind you that there's only one position on the board for a county commissioner designated as such, but this board has chosen for those at-large positions to either be county commissioners or county managers. Charles Vine, you're in luck too. 3 more years as an additional member at large. Does anybody have any questions about those? Or are you happy with what you see? Except for Carl, he's going to be happy. All right. So this is the list that will be presented. This is the list that will be presented at the December 11th board meeting. Slate of officers. Those are the existing officers, and everybody, we assume, will be willing to continue in those positions. Definitely Rick and Charles, because we've talked. The other folks, we hope they will continue. Well, we're recommending that they continue. Any questions? Comments? Snide remarks. I had a teacher in high school that would end his classes by saying, question, comment, snide remarks. There you have it. And we did not discuss the Finance Committee or the Quality Assurance Committee or the Nominating Committee. The assumption is that all of those will stay the same.
Thank you very much for your report.
Yes, sir.
Next item on the agenda, a couple items. One, everybody received a draft copy of the 2015 meeting dates. I don't think we need to vote on those. Does everybody get a chance to review those dates? I haven't seen conflict of any, like the association or any of those kind of conflicts.
Do we vote on them in December?
Okay, we would, okay. One thing would like to point out, on this calendar is a retreat on February 27th and 28th in 2015. And if there's no meeting, no board meeting in July or in November. And then the plan is to follow the same type schedule with a 1 o'clock executive committee, 3 o'clock performance and quality committee, and also 3 o'clock finance committee, and then of course the board of directors meeting for vote. So we'll vote on this in December. So you haven't had a chance to, yes ma'am.
Could you tell me what date the meeting is?
December the,
Well,
11th, I think it is.
that's on there. And 11, you talking about this year? Yeah, 11. Next meeting.
Plan it out.
Also, like to point out, if you haven't, you'll receive an email tomorrow from Jill concerning the North Carolina Council meeting in Pinehurst. It's a very important meeting. The dates for that meeting is December 3rd through the 5th. December 3rd through the 5th, and that's the North Carolina Council meeting in Pinehurst. At the request of President Ronnie Beal, there were a number of goals set, top 5 goals for the Health and Human Services, legislative goals for the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. The number 1 goal was seek legislation to expand Medicaid coverage under the Affordable Care Act. And number 2 was support the current model of public mental health administration, ensure adequate state funding, legal services, facilities at the local level, and structure appropriate county appropriation and governance. Number 3 is oppose shifting of Medicaid back to the counties. Number 4 was support Medicaid reimbursement to EMS for mental health and substance abuse transport to crisis centers. Number 4, title number 4 was avoid shifting or cutting money from federal and state block grants, including TANF, SSBG, CCBBG, HCCBG, and WCA for mandated services. Number 5, ensure adequate Medicaid reimbursement levels from the state to cover the cost of services and use federal guidelines for determination of medical necessities. And also number 5 is retain county management of non-emergency Medicaid transport. So just make sure everybody's aware of that. Let's see. One other thing, Tracy, you want to give us a quick update on the Evergreen settlement, or are you Brian?
Everybody should have received an email with a copy of the settlement agreement. It is final. All necessary elements have occurred. And there was a press release that Shelley coordinated with Denise Coleman. Yep, Denise Coleman. And just a reminder that we want to limit our comments out in the community to what's in the press release. However, there has been a public records request for the settlement agreement, which we anticipated as it is a public record. And Jay is coordinating with the Silver Herald on that. So there may be additional details in the Silver Herald coming soon. But does anybody have any specific questions about the settlement? Did everybody receive a copy?
Great.
Tracy, the press release was attached to the agreement, so just for you as board members, if you review that, the comments within that press release or the limits is to discuss.
Tracy, I don't remember seeing that email. Would you mind sending it to me again?
Yes.
About the settlement?
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, many of you probably realize, and if you don't, Lisa Slusher will be retiring on November the 30th, 2014. And so there's a few things we'd like to say about Lisa. We asked her to give a 30-minute speech, but she said she was just cut it down to 3 minutes. I would like to say part of this is, I call this Lisa Slusher by the numbers. We have figured that Lisa has attended at least 240 board meetings and board committee meetings. If you think you go to a lot of meetings, Carl, think about it. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Has spent over 1,440 hours, 86,400 minutes. You probably know all this. You can tell us a second. 5,184,000 seconds. And at least over 6,000 pages of basic reports to the board. Pretty impressive stuff. Lisa started to work with Smoky Mountain on March 3rd, 1988, correct?
That's correct.
Hugh Moon was the area director. Lisa has served at several positions. Her first position with Smoky was business manager. She can't keep a job because she was also the assistant finance officer, special programs director, and of course in March she accepted the position of CFO. And her retirement is November 30th, 2014. one item I want to mention is that she did receive a letter of commendation from, hard for me to say this, Tom McDivitt, and in February of 1990 for her work in the conversion and development of the first computer system at Smoky.
Well, that date should have.
Somebody put here before,
When you
there was no internet at the time, so.
got rid of the slide rules, right?
Would also like to mention that Lisa's retirement celebration is Monday, November 17th, from 3 to 5:30 in Cecilia. And I believe we've got an email about it? Yes, okay, we have. So all four members are welcome to attend. And it was not that long ago I attended a meeting where Lisa and another employee were recognized, and she was actually known as Princess Lisa. So at this time,
Oh, you got
we want you to go back here, Lisa.
Yeah, I know.
Really, come on, Lisa.
You can say no now, Lisa.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, come on, Barry, you wouldn't turn it on yourself over there.
Well, I had a chance to try to compose some great things to say when we had our staff luncheon or something, right? And let me start off with this disclaimer. Good chance I'll embarrass not only myself but Lisa in this. I'm not really sure where to start other than to say that I actually, when Lisa put together her letter of resignation, she came in my office and gave it to me. And I've been in unbelievable denial about this. Let me just start with that. I actually taped it to the wall next to my desk so that I would have to see that, and I'd have to look at that and get my mind wrapped around, what the world would be like without Lisa. And that is not easy for me. All the things that people say about other individuals, they get so worn out that when it comes to times like this, it doesn't seem good enough. So, part of the struggle is for me to use some of those same words, but for you to understand just, how heartfelt and accurate they are for Lisa. That she's 1 in a million, that one, you've all used that, right? Well, in the state of North Carolina, if I were to pick people that had her knowledge base and skill, it'd be on one hand. And if I were to go, and take the next step and say, they climbed this mountain that we're on now. Let me see if I could guess. I bet you when Smokey started out, was it a $10 million organization? 15 maybe?
Well, when I started, it was a little under 5 million.
Under 5 million. Well, I was off by 100%. So 5 million to, I guess, probably, I don't know, what will be at our next cap table. Let's say 360 million. What's the magnitude of change there? Well put, Carl. So you get some idea, an organization that's doubled its size twice in a year and a half, has undergone an absolute, change in terms of what it does and how it does it to some degree. And, there's a handful of positions that are absolutely key to that. And the CFO, that's right up there. So, starting with that huge knowledge base and great sense of professionalism, moving that all through this era to be here, you get 1 in a million is about right. It's probably more than 1 million. You add to that, all the benefits of her demeanor and approach and the way she does things is, you start ending up with a combination of factors in an individual that is extremely uncommon. And we have been huge benefactors of that. Lisa's been a pillar. And the extent to which I have relied on her, and other people we could have a line out the door of people that say the same thing. I'm saying it me. But the organization has benefited tremendously from her, and you don't even understand it or know it. But the role that she's done has a lot to do with our success. It's that simple. And what are we going to do without you? Fred, we love you, and we're going to love you more over time. But, this is very hard. This is very hard to think of going to work and not having Lisa there, and just all the comfort that you have been for all of those reasons. So this is not easy, personally and professionally, but I want to wish you the best. And there was a resolution earlier about not accepting her retirement. Are you going to act on that?
We're going to discuss that later.
Okay. We're not going to let her get too far. I think with any luck, we will have her around to help us out in some special projects when, days that the fish aren't biting and she doesn't have anywhere to go or no beaches to go to or anything like that. So we're certainly hoping to get you to, visit us and continue to stay engaged with us. And if thank you can be enough, I guess I'll just stop there and say thank you. Okay? Okay, so here's what it says. Presented to Lisa Slusher. Congratulations on your well-deserved retirement after 26 years of exemplary dedication and unparalleled performance. In sincere gratitude for your wisdom and steadfast leadership in finance, you have successfully led us from an area program to a local management entity and finally into the managed care organization we are today. Thank you, Board of Directors of Smoky Mountain LME MCO, Brian Ingram, CEO. So there you go. Thank you. Okay.
And
Even got some flowers.
got some
Thank
flowers
you.
for you.
Thank you.
Okay, I can hold them for you.
Yeah.
Now you
Thank
may
you.
have a few words, I hope.
Yeah, I do want to just say a few words. I have had a very long career at Smoky, and it has gone very fast, for one thing, which is kind of surprising because somebody said, I think, Rick, you had maybe 4 more years, and I said, wow, it'll go probably just like that, and it really does. It has been so enjoyable and rewarding, and I think most of it is really just working for an agency that has had such a positive impact on so many lives. That's one thing, probably it would have been fun to have gone back and counted over the years how many individuals and their families have been touched by Smoky Mountain. And to be a part of that has really been what it's about, and I think that's why most of us are here. I know that's why you're here. The board, you're so inspiring. You show up month after month. All the data that you're given, how you can interpret and absorb it and make decisions is beyond me. But you've done that month after month, and especially the finance committee. You get so much financial detail that I'm sure has to be boring at times. But again, you understand it, you absorb it, and you have provided great leadership to Smoky Mountain. Brian, Christina, the executive leadership team. When I think back about going on the waiver, and actually one of the claims staff said this to me the other day, one of the direct line staff, we really had the right core of people at the right time to get on waiver. Dr. Martin, Nancy, Brian, Christina, especially with your leadership, Brian, and really having us prepare for that year, which I think some of us thought, really prepare for a year for something? I'm not sure that was really enough, when you look back, but just the leadership that we've had. And some people have asked me recently, what will I miss most? And it's really not being part of the success of the future. Smoky's always been one of the best, if not the best MCOs in the state, and I know that will continue. So I think every few weeks I'm gonna have to call Brian and say, okay, what do we, I was gonna say, what have we done now? But what is what we accomplished now? That will be
How about-
hard for me. That would be.
And I'm not gonna lose your telephone number, so.
Yeah, but it's been a great ride, and again, I really appreciate all the support and confidence that the board and the leadership has placed in me over the years. So, thank you.
All right. Okay.
Let's give another round of applause.
Okay.
Don't forget November 17th. Okay, Brian?
Okay. Short and sweet, integrated care initiatives. One of the things I want to always explain when we come to this topic and we do this at staff meetings and a like here is what we think of when we say integrated care. And I want to remind folks that we have fantastic programs that we are beginning. We have ongoing day-to-day things that care coordination is involved with. That is the epitome of care coordination. It is what help does John Smith need? That's what we're here for. And Rhonda Cox has me so well trained, I can almost recite the federal definition of care coordination that we are responsible for. And it really, just as I said, it's the individual in the community. It's more than just the behavioral health needs, the health care needs. It's housing, it's where you live, it's what you do and what help you need. So the most comprehensive view that you can take of an individual, that's where we are on a daily basis with those folks. It exists with the pilot programs that I'm going to ask Christina to talk about in a minute. Just fantastic programs that we're engaged with that ugly Buncombe County again, and Mission and Mayhack and CCNC around individuals in the emergency department and the integration efforts to provide both primary health care and basic behavioral health treatment, because they have not availed themselves of those types of services and what a big impact that can make for people. And then we have, just a phenomenal program. We started off calling it our Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Help Home, and now I think we're calling it an institute. Christina has been fantastic with that. Dr. Stephen Crane from Mayhack has been, just an absolute champion of that. So all of those programmatic activities, individual, programmatic, and then there's the larger scale. What is going to happen in North Carolina that will reflect the changes necessary for the reform of health care and the Medicaid program. And you watch the secretary, the governor's office through the secretary come out with a couple of different versions of that. You saw that, and you used to be able to say the General Assembly version. Well, we have the House version and we have the Senate version, and they're very different. Some elements the same, but one in particular has to do with, as the secretary is fond of saying, whole person care. Well, how's that going to get done? Because the organization on the macro does not pull those together. We operate as a carve out. That's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. We are what we are because it represents a specialty area of care. And it is that way because of the nature of the services. and the specialization that's required. It's not unlike other areas of medicine that represent specialty areas of care there. It's just maybe a wider circle, I guess you could say. So how is all of that going to come together? You know, a good part of my activity as of late has been with what structural changes, what direction should Smokey head in to face that future. I was in a meeting with Secretary Voss and her two deputies, and the question that came from Dr. Cummings, who's the deputy on the Medicaid side, said, well, you know, all the CEOs from the MCOs are there. And his question was, well, what are you doing to prepare yourselves to work with accountable care organizations? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? So for us in Western North Carolina, you know, we have the luxury, I think, of fantastic partners that are very like-minded around, you know, the need to craft an approach that is based on our strengths and the public infrastructure that we have. And that partnership exists with MAHEC, it exists with Mission, it exists with Smokey and others, but you know, there seems to be a coalescing of energy with those organizations to say, you know, there's not somebody else that knows how to do this better than we do. You know, not to be cocky about it, but you know, we do have experience with this. We do have a stake in the future of healthcare, and we believe that we can approach this in a way that offers the opportunity for a greater integrated healthcare delivery system. So there's at the 50,000 foot level, the activities we're involved with, and there's down on the grassroots level that we're, you know, involved with in the day-to-day. And given the length of our meeting today, I'm gonna try to be brief with that and kind of leave it at that unless anybody has any questions. You know, in the Western Regional Partnership, let me try to merge these two together. In your packet, we copied two things I want to bring your attention to. One is an article from the Winston-Salem Journal. I'm sure many of you saw this, and I know from our discussions earlier that folks got phone calls about it. I know I did. Got different communications, being kind of curious about it, and I'll tell you a funny little story here. But I want to give you a chance to just, you know, go through this article and then kind of point out a couple of areas in it. In particular, on the first page, if you go down, I guess it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph that starts off board members. It says, board members were told during their second special meeting in a month that one of the two merger partners for a proposed 35-county Western Region, Smoky Mountain Center, is considering going another route with Mission Health of Asheville. In the discussion scenario, Mission would establish an accountable care organization with Smokey providing behavioral health services on a contract basis. Well, you notice that's not a quote from Brian Ingram entering one at Smokey, right? Okay? The reality is we're involved in discussions to create what we're calling a regional care organization. That would not be run by Mission. Smokey would not be contracting with Mission. It would be a collaborative effort to, again, fashion an approach that would create the greatest possible integration of healthcare delivery that we could make, that would also provide for, let's say, the requirements that I think everyone has come to, largely around cost control. On the healthcare side with Medicaid, whole person care, cost control, value. You know, how are we going to get that out of what we have now? So that's not really accurate, but you know, I don't control what gets put in the paper, just like you don't. And then it goes down further and says Brian Thompson, at the bottom of the first page, CenterPoint's chairman, said merger talks have cooled in recent weeks, primarily on Smoky Mountain's end Brian Ingram, Smoky Mountain Executive Director, could not be reached for comment. Well, two things I could say about that. Merger talks have not cooled as a result of Smoky Mountain. You know, the pace that we have taken is been measured by our joint ideas around how fast and how far we go, both with partners and Centerpoint and Smoky, and there's nothing about anything I've done to change that pace, and we've all, you know, kind of agreed to that. So again, I would say that doesn't represent an accurate statement. And then, but I wasn't able to be reached for comment. I just checked here. Richard Craver did. Apparently, this was based on a board meeting that he attends and writes about, and it says that it was published at 10:45. Well, Richard emailed me at 7 o'clock, and it's really kind of interesting. I give him credit. He's good at baiting people into conversations that they maybe shouldn't have, and saying things that they probably go too far about. And it just says, appears Centerpoint Board is having second thoughts on the region and considering reopening old and new merger partner options. Writing for Wednesday paper, thanks. And my response was, not sure I was up to speed on this as you may be. Can you explain what happened this evening or to prompt your inquiry? And he wrote back to me at 11:27 and said, it was mentioned that Smoky Mountain was considering partnership or contracting with Mission Health instead of Western Region Plan. So I guess if you follow that timeline, you understand how really couldn't have a response since the article was written at 10:45, which I think comes before 11:30 when he emailed me that second time. But that's just, you know, that's just how it is. That's just how it is, you know, in a sense. So, you know, this caused a lot of ripples. It does when these things are in the paper, and again, it's not something we can necessarily control. And it's always a challenge to know how and when to respond to the media. If I would have had more time and been prepared even to offer a response, it's a little bit ahead of I think what we were prepared to say. Maybe just hadn't organized the information completely. But if you look at the second sheet of paper there, that's the yellow one, I think, you know, you kind of shoot for one side of the paper and, you know, what you can say about something. You know, that's our best effort right now at talking about kind of all the key components. You know, that our approach is absolutely consistent with Department of Health and Human Services, and in fact, you know, we've had some meetings with them that have been very positive, very encouraging. They understand why this is such an interesting and potentially good plan. We talked a little bit about, you know, just as Dr. Heck was saying earlier, you know, this is just on some level, just a really simple approach to solving a problem. You know, using the resources that we have, kind of extending them, maturing what we do, and the notion that this is local. This is us in our community. These are people's jobs. You know, here we live. Again, you know, is there somebody from somewhere else that can come and do this better than us? I don't think so. I don't think it's arrogant to say that. I mean, I think we've got a good track record of what we do. I think NAHAC and Mission does as well. And capitalizing on that makes a lot of sense. Now, is there anything about that? Is that somehow mutually exclusive from the work that we do with the Western Regional Partnership? No, it isn't. You know, and I think over time we will see how these things will fit together. You have to remember that plan for regionalization happened way back here, okay, before the latest iteration of plans from DHHS for healthcare and Medicaid reform. And then we had the General Assembly, and the direction that all of that is taken is around the development of, if you prefer, accountable care organizations, provider-led network on the healthcare side, those being the major features of how this would be done. Well, then the question, now you can understand why Robin Cummings, Dr. Cummings would ask us, so MCOs, LME MCOs, how are you going to fit into the growth and the development of accountable care organizations? Great question. Well, here's how we're talking about doing it. How does that relate to there being 4 regional NCOs across the state? I'm not sure. But I feel pretty confident about what we're doing here as far as a good approach for Western North Carolina. We're not saying that that is the answer for the entire state. We are saying that it makes a lot of sense for us here. So I certainly would enjoy Dr. Heck's comments.
I think you covered it well. I mean, I think we're fleshing out all the details, but we're doing I think we're doing what we need to do. It will expand services and reduce cost and help to take care of the population of the entire region.
It will be more and more public. We're beginning to have conversations with other hospitals, healthcare systems. It's always a challenge, as new things are being tested and talked about, and kind of the pace of that, and who gets told first, and when, and how all of that bounces around. So, just to give you an idea, that the day this article came out, in the afternoon, I avoided a trip to Raleigh to be on, I'm on the DWAC committee. For those of you that don't know, that's the Waiver Advisory Council. And I participated by phone, and apparently, they forgot I was on the phone or something, and people started talking about it. This is in Raleigh for about 6 hours. Well, I don't know, it was in the afternoon, I said. And people started talking about this article in the newspaper. And, I forget what the question, what is this, how is this going to work? And I heard a CEO of perhaps the largest provider organization in the state say, well, don't you understand, Mission and Smoky are merging? And I'm on the phone, and Christina's there, and I said, did I just hear that right? I wasn't even aware of that myself. So, you get the idea, right? You're going to hear all kinds of things. People take a little information and do whatever with it. So, Mission and Smoky are merging. But we are enjoying a very productive working relationship. Okay, statewide developments. I've been part of a statewide DSS panel looking at how to get the maximum benefit out of our great partners that are the DSSs. And I went because we've been solid with this long before I came here, and participated in all kind of regional groups, and will continue to. One other issue I want to make sure we talk about that we've had a lot of discussion with providers about, our providers that do mobile crisis. And I'm going to try to very simply state this. DMA has determined that there is a conflict around mobile crisis services being provided in hospital emergency departments, such that it will be prohibited by January 1st. So we have been scrambling to try to work not only with our providers, but with our hospitals to come up with alternate plans for how care could be rendered to those folks in emergency departments, since mobile crisis will not be able to go there. Now, and Jenny could kind of reel this off even better than I could, but let's say there's about probably a third of our hospitals where this really won't matter to any great extent, because they've already gone to a model where they do it themselves in-house, and that's very much kind of the mission approach to things, and most of their hospitals in their network are operating with a model like that or going in that direction. then there's maybe about a third where there's some involvement and it's gonna, change some things, but, there's a way to see how it could work out. And then there's another third for which it's I don't mean to be hyperbolic here, almost catastrophic. They do not have, so to your comment, Carl, about rural hospitals, here we go. It tends to be those more rural hospitals. How they are going to, mobile crisis being in the ED is great value not only to the hospital and the medical staff, but also to the individuals that are there. And that's just how it works. And they do not have the resources clinically to deal with folks in those kind of presentations. So how this gets worked out, I don't know. But it's not going to be perfect. That much I can tell you.
And it's going to cost the hospital. And I think it's crazy because this was free service to them. And I really do not understand how they could come up with this decision and the amount of money that it's going to cost the hospitals to try to come up to replace the good service that they had there. And it was free service to them. This is one of the craziest things they've ever done.
Well, this is DMA.
I know.
It's their interpretation.
I know.
I'll be back on my soapbox, but they don't provide, if they're going to stop providing mobile crisis in the hospitals, they don't provide mobile crisis in the jails. I mean, when people have crises in these institutions in rural areas, as you said, we don't have the capacity locally to have these people all the time. What do we do?
Well, I can try to answer your question.
Well, mine was rhetorical, you're welcome to answer it, but it was.
My responsibility is to answer the question. What we're doing, and Duncan can talk about this, he's been in a couple of our meetings, hospitals will be left to either develop that ability themselves or contract with, for example, that organization, Appalachian, RHA, Daymart, that does the mobile crisis. They would have to have a private contract, which is not, really, it's very different and it's a new expense, but it's not unlike how medicine is practiced. Hospitals have, emergency departments have all kinds of contracts with, specialty healthcare providers. And that's not unusual, but it's just that this is just a harsh new expense and difficulty.
To be blunt, it's a cost shift. It's what we're doing in our jail now. We have a contract through you for mobile crisis effectively in our jail, and it's a cost shift to us. It's something bill we get to pay because our detention officers aren't capable of dealing with those situations. Hospitals, it's a cost shift to the hospitals.
So, Jenny, what did I miss?
You did a wonderful overview. I think that we could make 2 additional points, just because people in this room may be wondering about which hospitals are most affected. So most affected, Wilkes, Caldwell, Haywood, in terms of actual volume and actual reliance and what has become a very good collaborative, cooperative relationship with MCM. I would say those are the 3 hospitals most affected. Now, to the point of how will the hospitals pay for this, the conversation that they're in right now is to look at their own ability to bill Medicaid, which is what we have done. We have billed Medicaid to pay for that service when the MCM team went to the hospital. So the hospital itself is now researching, okay, if we bill Medicaid and then maybe we contract with a provider for that service, this is a way of offsetting the cost. Here's the thing about the formula. What we know about people in crisis in North Carolina and in our counties is that more than 50%, more like 60% of them are not Medicaid eligible. We have never had the money to pay for this crisis service. As Mr. Nerday mentioned earlier, our state funds certainly do not pay for all of these state needs or unfunded needs. So on one hand, yes, the hospitals can explore Medicaid funding to offset the cost, but more than 50% of the people have no Medicaid, no insurance, no way of billing for that service that must be provided in that community.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is Vantage Point, Shelley Foreman.
Hello, I'm keenly aware that it's nearly 7 and I am standing between you and, but I determined to do dinner out there, I saw that whole.
It has been ready out there since 6:15. And I was asked when I thought it was going to be over. I said, oh, there's just one more item.
You wanna, we could make the executive decision just
To
do it next month.
I'm perfectly happy. I
That'd be
have
up to the
everything ready,
chairperson
and
here, I think.
I would like to, you to be interested, so.
I'd like to fill mine a little bit. I'll be more interested in December.
If you come, so get to go.
We'll put you earlier on the agenda.
Yes, I was an urban
Okay.
vet.
All right.
And Tommy had everything ready for me, so thank you, Tommy, for your
Thank you,
service.
Tommy and Michelle, for your understanding. Okay, there's nothing for consent agenda. The only other business I want to mention again, there's no November meeting. We meet again in December. Don't forget about Lisa's retirement celebration on November 17th. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second? Any other second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone.